Are you thinking about getting goats? Of course you are. They're like the entry-level homestead animal. It goes chickens and then goats. But before you bring those rambunctious little bundles of cuteness home, you need to know a few things. So let's talk about it. Should you or should you not get goats? Just look at this cute little thing. How could you not want to bring it home, right? Well, here's the first problem. They don't stay little for very long. This is Dale Bob. Dale was one of our first goats that we got. He was our first buck. And he was just a little thing when we got him. But boy, he grew. Which is not a problem. He is particularly gentle. He likes to play a lot. A lot of times he'll rear up like he's going to come down and give me a nice little headbutt. But he never does. He never has. Not a single time. You ain't gonna do nothing, are you? He's very playful, and he kind of looks at me almost like his daddy, I think. But if he wanted to, he could put on quite the wallop. Look at those horns. Oh. And even just playing, see, he about hooked me. You want some? You want some pettings too, huh? And this is one of Dale Bob's kids. I don't remember which one this one is. We had to bottle feed this one for a little while when he was little, so he's a good pet too, aren't you? Oh, don't be jelly. Uh-oh. Whew. So I think we kind of lucked out with this one because I trust him completely. What are you doing? And this little guy too. He's not quite as big as Dale Bob. He'll get there though, I think. But I trust Dale, like even behind my back, I don't have to keep an eye on him all the time. We can just hang out and we're good. Not all bucks are like that though. With a lot of goat bucks, you have to worry about their temperament. And especially when they get big, that's not something you necessarily think about when you think about bringing home that cute little baby goat. But when they get older, sometimes you got to watch for them. And see, now he's wanting to play. He's putting his horns up against me and just ever so slightly pushing. And if I push back a little bit, it's just going to get him riled up more. See, look at that. Boy. And even playing, if he came down and headbutted me like that, even just playing, that could do some damage. Or another issue with those big old horns, if he gets, let go of my shirt, boy. If he gets those horns wrapped around your arm or your leg, or if you get something stuck in between them, that could be a broken arm or a broken ankle or something like that. So definitely something to be aware of, especially if you have small children. And really, I think the only reason, quit pushing. I think the only reason why he is so gentle is because he was very well socialized when he was little. We played with him and hung out with him a lot, pretty much every day. Some of the others that we have out here, we haven't really had as much time to do that with. All of the ones that are here are bucks. We need to get rid of some of them. This guy right over here. What's up, Hulk? Another one of Dale's kids. He is going to be a hoss. He was born big. He is, I think, like a year younger than this guy right here, but not much different in size. Look at that. But we haven't really had enough opportunity to socialize him very well, so he won't let me get near him. So for Hulk over there, when he gets to be the size of Dale Bob and the age of Dale Bob, Dale is several years old, so he is quite mature, if you know what I mean. And when it gets that certain when it gets to that certain time of year when he's in rut, actually for him it's like year round. He's like year round ready to go. That's when he starts to get kind of playful, and sometimes he roughhouses a little too much. But for an animal like Hulk, when he gets to be that size and that age, we will not be able to trust him. He'll be one that he'll be liable to plow you over just because you're standing there. And even though Dale Bob is super gentle, his sheer size and rambunctiousness tends to cause a few other problems. I've got these fellas in the electric netting out here for a reason, because this guy right here is super destructive. Which brings us to the next thing you need to know before you bring home that cute little baby goat. They've got to have like Alcatraz level fencing. When we moved into our property, the whole pasture was fenced in with barbed wire. Something like this. I've added this strand here. The other 4 were already present, and this is nothing for a goat. Even with this one, like, those goats are able to squeeze through just the smallest little space. Barbed wire is definitely a no-go. So if you plan on keeping them in like just an entire pasture, you're gonna have to have something other than barbed wire, and it's probably gonna be expensive. So our solution was to build them a pen or a paddock. And being new to goats, we had no idea what we were in for. Here is where we used to keep our goats. You'll notice that it is extremely grown up, and it's obvious that there have not been any goats in here for quite a while. That is because we couldn't keep them in the darn thing. You see, when we built it, we started off using some of this welded wire fencing. We just picked it up from the farm supply store, and it worked okay for a little while until the goats started getting a little size to them. And then one thing that they really like doing is they like to rub their sides up against the fencing. They'll just push in and they'll walk down the entire length of the fence. And I don't know if that scratches some kind of itch that they have or what, but it really bows that fence inward. And when they start to get bigger, after a while, it begins to pop a lot of the welds on this welded wire fencing. And you can see there are spots all over the place where I have patched with chicken wire, extra layers of welded wire, remesh panels, just about anything I could get my hands on to patch up spots where they've created just a small little hole. If they can get their head through, their whole body is gonna go. And not only that, but they're gonna make the hole bigger and everybody's gonna get out. So if you've already got your heart set on bringing home that cute little baby, make sure you're aware that you're gonna need some pretty heavy duty fencing. Instead of getting that welded wire stuff, I would recommend getting some of the woven wire, something with a heavier gauge type of fencing. Something more for cattle, really. But again, barbed wire and welded wire fencing, complete no-go for these goats. Another thing to consider is feeding the things. If you have a large pasture and it's fenced in and they're not gonna be able to get out, that is probably going to be fine. They could stay on pasture pretty much all summer long without any sort of supplemental feed. But if you plan on keeping them in any sort of enclosed area, barn, paddock, anything like that, you're going to have to bring in feed. You can get it at the local farm supply stores, or my recommendation would be to find someplace local, maybe a local farmer or something, where you can get your feed a little bit cheaper. We have some folks around here that sell rice bran for a really good price, so we get a lot of that, and that makes up a lot of what we feed our animals. But if you are feeding some sort of grain feed, whether it be from the farmer down the road or the farm supply store, you are going to need to supplement with some hay. They have to have hay if you're going to be feeding them grain. If they don't have that hay, then it's going to throw off I think it's the pH that it throws off in their rumen, and they're going to bloat and die. So you need to make sure you have a plan for not just feed, but also hay, if you're not going to have them on pasture all the time. And then depending on your climate, like around here, we pretty much keep our goats and sheep on pasture year round, with the exception of maybe a couple of months out of the year, January, February, where it gets really cold. By then, most of the grass in the pasture is dead. And so we'll bring them up closer to the barn for something like a dry lot type of situation, and we'll start feeding them more grain, and then we'll have to bring in some more hay. But before you bring your goats home, you need to make sure you have some sort of plan for how you are going to get feed and where you're going to get your hay from. And then the last thing that I'm going to talk about in this video, there are probably tons of other considerations that you need to think about before you bring home goats. But for me, one of the more surprising aspects of owning a goat is how tough they are to keep alive. Growing up watching Saturday morning cartoons, you would always see the goat chewing on a tin can or a boot or something like that. They seem like the toughest animals in the world. You could just throw them out in nature and they were going to survive forever. It is not like that at all. They will chew on stuff. They'll chew on just about anything they can get their mouths on. But they are not super hardy animals. Oftentimes, it's almost like they're just looking for a place to lay down and die. They can be quite susceptible to intestinal worms, barber pole worms, so you're going to have to keep them wormed. And there are a handful of other illnesses and diseases that they can get, and they'll just go down quick. You'll come out one day, they're fine. Come out the next morning and they're on their side. And anymore, you can't just go to the farm supply store and pick up some antibiotics. You're going to need some type of a relationship with a vet. So if something does happen, you can call them up and have them prescribe you some antibiotics. And we've also found that it can be very helpful to get on some type of Facebook group for goats or sheep or whatever. I don't like to post on them particularly often because a lot of times the folks on there that are replying to comments tend to be know-it-all types, and not always the know-it-all type that wants to share the information, but the know-it-all type that wants to make you feel bad for not knowing it. But if you've got something going on with one of your animals, oftentimes you'll be able to go back and search through the group history and find something similar and maybe get a few ideas on what you can do. And shoot, it might not be a bad idea for you to find one or two of those groups and just scroll back through the history and see what kinds of issues you might encounter with goats and see if you think it's worth it. Owning farm animals is not always for the soft-hearted. Sometimes we have to make tough decisions when it comes to our animals based on what's best for the herd, and sometimes even for that individual animal who is in severe pain and there's no hope for it. But those are just a few of my thoughts. If I had it to do over again, I don't know if I would get goats or not. They tend to be a lot of trouble. However, I think if we had started off doing things right from the beginning, a more secure place for them that they wouldn't be able to break out of all the time, things like that, I think my experience would be a lot better. As a matter of fact, we are just about to revamp that entire area over there and bring our goats back to where they're supposed to be. And then after that, we'll be able to start milking them and they'll be of some use. Right now, it seems like they're not of any use. They're just wasting my time. But once we get everything set up the way that it should have been from the beginning, we'll start to be able to utilize them as a resource, and I think that'll make it more worth my while. Anyway, I hope this video has been helpful for you. Maybe it's given you a couple of things to think about. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If so, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. Leave us a thoughtful comment, and if you're interested in following along as we continue to try and turn our home into a homestead, then be sure to ring the notification bell so you'll know when to be back for more daily, sustainable living.